Hello and welcome to the first panel discussion in the new South Dakota Matters series hosted by South Dakota News Watch. I'm Bart Fancook and I'm the content director for News Watch and will be the moderator of tonight's event. As most of you know, South Dakota News Watch is the state's only nonprofit statewide journalism organization that since February 2018 has published more than 215 in-depth articles on topics of great importance to South Dakotans. Last week, we published an article examining the new South Dakota Civics and History Initiative that's now under development by the South Dakota Department of Education. The initiative was first proposed by Governor Kristi Noem and has received $900,000 in state funding for development. As it stands now, the four-pronged program will take about 2 years to develop and will include a new teacher training program, a new online depository of historic and government artifacts for use in the classroom, a series of pilot programs aimed at schools to come up with ideas and programs to improve social studies teaching and learning, and a review of existing history and civics curricular materials to better align them with state educational standards. We're proud to bring together a terrific group of engaged and highly informed experts tonight to discuss the initiative. As the discussion commences, the public is encouraged to submit questions to the panel through the chat function within the Zoom program. I'm wondering if we have the screen in the right position here. I'm not sure if you're seeing me on the screen. I'm seeing a blank screen at this time, so I wanted to address that before we go much further. But moving forward, I will now introduce our panelists, and looks like I'll be going in reverse order across the top, but alphabetical. Rhoda Bryan is a teacher in the Rapid City school system and is head of the social studies department at Rapid City Central High. Jace DeCory is a Lakota elder who taught for 3 decades in the American Indian Studies program at Black Hills State University in Spearfish, where she's now a professor emeritus. Jacqueline Sly is a retired teacher who served as a Republican lawmaker from Rapid City for about a decade and is now chairwoman of the State Board of Education Standards. And also with us is Tiffany Sanderson, the South Dakota Secretary of Education, who was appointed to that cabinet post in December after prior service as a senior policy advisor on K-12 and other issues in the office of Governor Noem. Welcome all, and welcome to all of our viewers, and thank you for being here tonight. So I'd like to start to give each panelist an opportunity to share with our audience a bit about your experience with history and civics education, and why you feel it's important that it be taught and taught in a fair and honest manner, and just the importance overall of civics and government teaching in the K-12 schools. And I would start with Ms. Bryan.
Thanks, Bart. Appreciate the introduction. So obviously, as a social studies teacher, I find civics education and history education of very important. But this isn't anything new to a content teacher like myself. When you choose to go into a certain content, normally it's because you have a love for it or a love for the importance of it. And so I really have found that history education, at least in the Rapid City area school districts, we have spent a lot of time over the last 5 years that I've been there, developing really great curriculum, and also putting a lot of time into new curriculum. We had developed some new books and things like that when I first came there. So there's just a lot of changes that we have done already. So there's a lot of things that we already have kind of in place. Obviously, anytime that there's civics or history as a focus when it comes to education, we're going to be excited about that as social studies teachers, because we really believe that students understanding the importance of citizenship, understanding the importance of our history, not only our national history, but also our state history, and our history with indigenous peoples. There's so much to learn about and to basically teach our students about. So we definitely focus on that at Central, but any time that we have more focus, I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to see like what this initiative is going to look like. inform. So I'm always excited when I hear people talk about the importance of civic education, because that is at the basis of why I'm teaching today. So thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you. Ms. DeCory, how maybe you can give us a couple of insights into your view of history education in South Dakota. And please remember to unmute.
Of course, I forgot to unmute.
That's okay.
Having taught at Black Hills State University for over, 33 years. When I taught there, I recently retired, but I taught multidisciplinary courses, a whole number of different kinds of courses, because that's what American Indian Studies is involved in. I team taught an ethnobotany course. I taught American Indian art history. I taught early American Indian history and culture 1 and 2, and American Indian women. So there was a number of a diverse variety of courses that I did teach. And I felt that it was really powerful that we did in our program have an interdisciplinary approach, because that's how we look at the world as Lakota people. It's not by subject. Now we're going to teach history. Now we're going to teach civics. It's all involved in one way or another. And so I really appreciated the fact that Black Hills State saw the importance of that in our curriculum. And since I am a grandmother and feel I've been involved in education for so many years. Both of my parents were educators, teachers. And so I grew up seeing the importance of preparing for classes and preparing all kinds of materials that they spent till sometimes midnight, and then they'd get up early in the morning to have to give that material to their students. So I understand and value the importance of education. And I also think it's very important that words are very powerful. So the oral oratory, things that we say and that come out in the classroom, but things also that are written down for posterity, very powerful. So we have to be very careful how we word things and how we include those in the classroom, because we are putting that out in the universe. And so in preparation for developing curriculum and developing ideas that will hopefully be used in the classroom and resources and whatnot, I think it's very important that those be done in a very conscientious way. And I don't want to say anything about the educators now, because I know that there are many good educators out there that are using a variety of resources and materials, but it can't hurt to have more of those opportunities for them to use in the classroom. And so I hope that my grandchildren and our future generations of Wakainja, which is our Lakota term for children, sacred beings, I hope that we can think about that when we're developing, and whoever's doing this development and whoever's going to be using it in the classroom will think about that in the next 7 generations, because that's how we plan things. Thank you.
Thank you. And Secretary Sanderson, I wonder you could tell us, give us just a brief overview of how you're seeing your new job and how you see the initiative playing into that.
You bet. Thanks, Bart. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you, part of the discussion tonight. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for South Dakota and education in South Dakota. As Rhoda shared, there's a lot of good things happening in our schools across the state, especially at the middle school and high school levels, around civic education, history education, economics, geography. And this initiative is really in the spirit of helping to strengthen what we're doing in classrooms across the grade spans, kindergarten through high school level, and ensuring teachers have the support that they need to do their jobs in the best way possible. And so excited for many people to be around the table in discussions over the next couple of years, helping to strengthen social studies education. I think one of the powerful things here, and opportunity, one of my mentors when I was a young professional talked about everything speaks. And I think that as adults, what we say, what we model, really resonates with young people. And this is an opportunity for us to put a focus on the importance of unity and collaboration here in South Dakota as we tackle the next steps within social studies education.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ms. Sly, maybe you can tell me about your thoughts on history and government teaching, and then I'm going to come back to you for another question that I think you're prepared to answer.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here too. I was thinking as each one of you were speaking that when we're talking about history, I just happened to find the South Dakota history book that was in use when I was in grade school. I went to a country school, and this one was published in 1956 by Educator Supply Company out of Mitchell, South Dakota. And I just wanted to read you a little bit because I know that we're looking at history, not only South Dakota, but also our world. But just thinking back when I was in school, this is what was said. The history of South Dakota is very brief, not as long as the span of a man's life. We have tried to impress upon the minds of the readers how much has been accomplished in so short a time. We have avoided dates, political campaigns, and issues as much as possible. We've tried to present a picture of the steady flow of history through the part of the world in which we live, from the formation of the earth until the present. It's our desire to win the interest of our children in the people of the world, and especially in our part of the world. If we accomplish this aim, history will no longer be the dead, dry subject many of them imagine it to be. And I think that's really our goal. We don't want it to be something that is dreaded. But I think that what's happened over the years, even in the time that I've been teaching, which I started in the late 1960s, early 70s. And at that time, we were kind of doing the war on poverty was coming through. And then after that, in the 80s, we started with the nation at risk. And all of a sudden we were thinking, oh, we better focus a lot on math and English language arts and reading, those types of things. And as we did, some of the social studies and science, I think throughout this time has gotten set aside because we were so worried as we went into the early 2000s of like, oh, we have to take these tests and we have to prove that the kids know all of this stuff. And then we set aside that rich history that adds so much into the teaching and incorporating it, whether it is in language arts or in other areas too. And I just think that this is a great opportunity for us to bring that back even stronger than what we have in the last years, as we're realizing we have lost a lot of the science and the history and social study aspect that we really need to bring that back.
Well, I want to stick with you, Ms. Sly. As you know, you and I went back and forth about the use of the term curriculum, and we're a strong local control state, and lawmakers have used this as a history and civics curriculum, and I've seen it in other media outlets. You say it's not a curriculum and that this isn't encroaching on local control. Can you take a moment and explain why you feel so strongly that, and explain why you don't see this as a curriculum and that this isn't interfering with local control over how children are taught?
Sure, I'd be glad to. First of all, I think we need to kind of identify what those different words mean, because like you had said, Bart, well, we just interchange them. Yes, we do. But if we're in education, they have very distinct meanings. And I think that's where that can maybe clear up some of that. First of all, we start with standards. And standards are what we want our students to know by the end of the school year. And that's what's expected of them. And that does come from the state. And it is true the State Board of Education approves them, but the work is done behind the scenes by many, 50 or more people involved in education from all the different areas, whether it's elementary or it's economics or the US history, world history. They come together and work behind the scenes, reviewing those standards, what we want our students to know at the end of this school year for each grade level or subject area too. Well, then we move into the curriculum, and that is determined at the local school district level. And the curriculum is, say, like the, if you're looking at the units of instruction or scope and sequence, what order are you going to be teaching it to your students? And also that it really provides like a roadmap. How are you going to get the students to have that understanding at the end of the year? How are you going to get them there? That is the curriculum that's determined at the local level. Then we have another layer that even brings it down a little closer to where the teachers are determining a lot of that. And that's the instructional materials and resources. They get to pick and choose what they're going to do. How are they going to teach them to do it? So let me give you an illustration that all of you can probably identify with. Okay, there's going to be a meeting in Pierre on April 20th, and each one of us on this panel are going to be in Pierre at that meeting. That's the standard. We're going to be there. It's going to start at 10 o'clock. That's the expectation. How are we going to get there? The roadmap to get there. Well, I live in Rapid City, so I'm going to take a different road than what Tiffany would have to take. Tiffany's actually very close, so she has a shorter road. Jace, I'm not sure where you live. Bart, where you live. We're often, and we have some different options. I can go a couple different ways to get to Pierre. Okay, that's the curriculum, but that is based on that roadmap that we have. We have to go on a pathway to get there. Then when we look at the instructional materials, okay, I might go in my Subaru, but Bart might go in his Chevy pickup. He gets to pick and choose. That's even at a lower level. So we have the standards. We're going to go to a meeting. The roadmap is the curriculum. How are we going to get there? And then we have the instructional materials. That's our vehicles that we use, our tools that we use to get there. And so with that, I hope that helps, because it's the only thing that's determined at the state level is that's required are the standards that are determined at the state level. All of the rest of that, the curriculum, the books they use, the tools they use, the additional resources, that's all determined at the local level.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's important for people to understand. I don't know that that takes away all the concerns that this is the state forcing its way into the classroom, but I think that explanation is important. I want to turn to Secretary Sanderson here with a question about what really was became the heart of my reporting on after 2 weeks of talking to people across the state about the initiative. So far, no one's been determined to be the final arbiter of what is in the initiative. There's no panel or individual. And this initiative came from Governor Noem, as we know, who has called the presidential election rigged, hasn't backed off of that, has become more and more outspoken on social issues in South Dakota and more outspoken on national issues, including some fairly incendiary comments in the minds of some about immigration, the immigration policies of the Biden administration today. I wonder what direction have you received from Governor Noem? How involved is she in this process? And do you feel like you can assure the public that politics is going to be kept out of what ends up being the contents of the initiative?
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Bart. So yes, the governor is very interested in the initiative as a whole and ensuring that our students in South Dakota understand our rich history and the story and how we've gotten to this place and can engage as really engaged, productive citizens in their adult lives. That's at the heart of why this initiative came about. And as we go forward, there are multiple processes or opportunities within the scope of the project that will involve South Dakotans wholly coming together at the table and talking about, as Jackie said, what are the standards? What are our expectations at all the different grade levels around social studies for what students know and understand and are able to do? So as an example, one of the current kindergarten economic standards is describing the difference between wants and needs. That's the kind of conversation that the Standards Revision Committee will be discussing and determining and making recommendations to the Board of Education standards for setting what the content standards are in social studies as we go forward. And really those social studies standards are the foundation for all of the rest of the work that's coming up over the next couple of years. Teacher professional development, instructional materials that are available for South Dakota teachers on South Dakota history, South Dakota government, our geography, all of that will be based on what the Standards Revision Committee determines is the expectation for our students here in the state. And so, as Jackie mentioned, that committee alone will be 50 people or more who will be working over this summer to identify those expectations by grade level and subject area. And then from there, we'll start into the development of South Dakota instructional materials, which are going to be available for use by the public, by classroom teachers, but certainly not mandated. And so again, there'll be a large committee of folks coming together and experts across the state from all angles of our state and the rich fabric that we have here to make sure that we're focused on South Dakota needs and raising our young people in South Dakota values.
I'm going to keep you on the hot seat here on this issue. I wonder, I look at the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Governor Noem has said that a lack of civics education was at the root of that attack, not mentioning the fact that the president had egged people on and there were Trump supporters there. How would you see that being taught in history classes in South Dakota right now? Was that an insurrection by people who didn't understand the workings of government? Or was that an attack on the Capitol by people who were supporters of the president, who were egged on at a rally and made plans to go there and attack our legislators?
I won't put words in the mouth of anybody who was involved and what their motives were. I think that there are a couple of things that we can be really proud of in South Dakota. We have continued to have high expectations of our middle school and high school students, especially through graduation requirements that include U.S. history and U.S. government, and have more opportunities for credits, elective credits within social studies in order to graduate. Many states across the country have chosen to take out those requirements from their graduation expectations of students. And so in other places, it may be that they aren't having really strong instruction. I think Jackie's comments early on about the changes over time in terms of science and social studies kind of being edged out, especially at the elementary levels, as we focused on reading and math. It's certainly really important subjects, but at the expense, taking out social studies and science in many ways has cut back on students' opportunity for critical thinking and problem solving and creativity and collaboration in classrooms. And my hope through this initiative at the elementary level is we're able to blend social studies instruction and reading or English language arts together in many ways and help students have real life examples or real life experiences where they understand what community involvement looks like and what elected officials and volunteers in their community do every day to make their lives as good as possible in their local communities. So I think we've got good things happening in South Dakota, and we've got an opportunity to strengthen as we go forward.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Ms. Bryan, I want to ask you, when this initiative was first announced, there was some blowback from the teacher, from the classroom teaching side and school boards, in particular in Sioux Falls. Do you feel like there was an inherent criticism of the work that you're doing now, that things need to be enhanced, they need to be improved? You're on the front lines doing this for a living and teaching kids. Do you feel that this was that you're doing a good job now and this is needed, or do you feel like this is something that's superfluous and maybe just has there's a political motive behind it? I wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think I think we definitely do a good job teaching social studies, and I read some of those things from the Sioux Falls district and things like that, and I think one of the biggest voices I think that teachers wanted the community to hear was that we are teaching kids civics, and we are teaching them government, and we are teaching them U.S. history. And I know, like, especially as I'm teaching it in a high school, I even feel that parents don't even understand completely what their kids learn. I mean, what high schooler goes home and says, wow, you won't believe what I learned in chemistry today? I mean, it's not, you can, if you have a teen, you understand that. So I think sometimes parents in the community don't always understand like how much we teach or what's already there. I don't see it as an attack on my teaching. I didn't take it that way. I can only speak from my own perspective. I saw it as an opportunity for, if civics education can move more to the forefront, like I'm 110% behind that, because we did have, the nation at risk in the 1980s. It made us focus on math and science and reading initiatives. But civics education needs to be important. I think it is right now. I do believe it's important. And I think that the social studies teachers that I work with and that I have worked with in the past do an excellent job teaching right now. And I think the biggest thing I could speak from a teaching perspective is that we want parents in the community to know that we are teaching them government, and we are teaching them civics. And sometimes the classes may get labeled different things than it might have been when you were in high school, but it doesn't mean that we're not teaching some of those really essential things that those kids need to learn. For example, there used to be a class that was civics in the Rapid City Area School District. And that was done away with about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was replaced with a U.S. History 1. So we actually have 3 U.S. history classes in our district. But it doesn't mean that content was really changed. It was just kind of put into a little bit different form. So in History 1, we taught early beginnings, which also deals with civics education. But we're teaching civics education through History 1 when we're going through the beginning of American history. We're teaching it through History 2 when we're going through, kind of the middle, westward expansion to the Great Depression. And we're teaching it in US 3 when we're going from World War II to present day. And so I think just understanding that, and then those seniors get that, half credit of government. And that's, there's a reason why we reserve it for seniors. We want those kids to understand government as they're beginning to be a voter, and some, I teach government, some are already voters, based on their age. So I don't see it as an attack. I see it as a positive thing. But I definitely want to be the voice that says, we are teaching civics, we are teaching US history, we are teaching South Dakota history, we are teaching Oceti-Sakowin standards. They're a huge part of our curriculum. I can give you examples of that in each one of our classes. So it is a part of our curriculum already, but I definitely support any more resources or any more things that can help teachers 110%.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I wanted to turn to Ms. DeCory. So I was talking to a young adult recently who grew up in the South Dakota school system, and she mentioned to me that she felt like she was taught virtually nothing about Native history, treaties, land ownership, some of the atrocities that have been committed against Native peoples. Can you provide your insight into what you see at the college level when you have these high school graduates come to you and you start teaching them? And how can that element of our history be improved in the classroom, and why that's so important? And I know that's a 3-part question, but maybe you can give me your thoughts on that. And don't forget to unmute.
There. You'll have to remind me if I forget your 3-pronged question there. First of all, I think it's philosophically, I think it's very important that American Indian Studies or American Indian history and issues as related to civics be included at all levels. And I think one of the reasons why I was kind of concerned about this when Bart called me, I was thinking my students that when I taught at Black Hills State, one of the first questions I would ask them to get to know them better as students in my classes I would ask them, well, what class did you take? Have you ever taken an American Indian Studies class? And invariably, very few had taken American Indian Studies classes. And if they did, probably, I took a class from Monica at Stevens High School. I took a class at, and so they could list certain individuals where they took maybe an American Indian Studies class, but the majority of students, this was their first American Indian Studies class they'd ever taken at any level. And so I can relate to the young lady that was talking about being omitted. And that's one of the things, omission. And when you omit a chunk of material like major, not only historical events, but philosophical thoughts and the inclusion of how this particular minority group thinks about certain kinds of things, you're omitting we're not invisible, we're still here. And Native Americans, American Indian people, Native people are still on this earth, and we still are contributing members of society. And so I think that has to be dealt with. And historical accuracy, of course, and those inaccurate narratives depends on who tells the story. Is it a battle? Is it a massacre? Is an altercation? So again, the words that we use are very key. The false stereotypes, perhaps, misrepresentations, correct content, those things I think are very important. It can be very complex even. For example, the issue of, I was listening to another Zoom and a colleague of mine was talking about the issue of citizenship. And I thought he had some really interesting things to say. He was talking about the complex issue of citizenships in the United States for Native folks. And he made a very thorough, which I won't do tonight, but he made a thorough explanation of tribal citizenship, state citizenship, United States citizenship, and how we belong in all those arenas, and how many of us didn't become citizens until 1924. Many Native people know that, but some of our Native people, students coming out of high school, do not know that. And when they get into college, they say, what? And it becomes a shock to them. Certainly issues such, even more complex issues such as jurisdictional issues, tribal sovereignty, treaties, the treaties of 1851 and 1868, how reservations came to be. All of those things really perpetuate stereotypes if they're not adequately explained and brought up in the classroom. And that's what leads to more miscommunication and also bad feelings of students. So I deal with those issues right away when I did teach, because I think it's important that we thought of one another as having a civil discourse. And so we talked about what being civil is. What does it mean to be part of a Tioshpai? In my classrooms, they were Tioshpais. They were extended family members while they were in my classroom. So we talked about that philosophical belief and how we need to be respectful of all the members in our class. And they all have a voice, and no one is immune to, or everybody has a voice, and everybody should be included in that, and including Native American belief systems. So that's just a tip of the iceberg kind of thing, but mainly it's a philosophical and a feeling that correct Native information must and should be included within content, curriculum, standards. And I was wondering about, did I hear correctly that it is not mandated? It will be optional? Because when I look at the OSCU, the essential understandings that were developed, the standards for the tribal information, and I think that's wonderful that that's information, the Ocheti Shakoin understandings are used, but it is not required. It is optional. So I know teachers that either are afraid or are reluctant, or maybe are not do not feel competent enough to handle some of the information that is in those that are, you know, remain in those understandings. So I guess I need some clarification on whether they are mandatory, if this is going to be mandatory information that will be included, or will it be optional again? So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I could tell you that the initiative is optional, the use of the materials that are developed and anything that's available. That's my understanding by how that's set up, is it's optional. I wanted to ask that question of Ms. Sly. The Oceti-Sakowin standards that are available to schools, is it correct to say that those are optional now? And I wonder if you have a sense for how often they're being used, and is there a time where those become mandatory in South Dakota, that educators will learn about Native history, the good and the bad, and teach that, and that's going to be required and not optional in individual school districts?
Thank you for that question, because I'm also on the Indian Education Advisory Council. And that conversation has been going on both with the Board of Education Standards and with the Indian Ed Advisory Council. And the Oceti-Sakowin Essential Understandings right now, and this was talked about, I've only been on the board not even 4 years. And it was talked about, we don't know which schools are using it, which ones aren't. We don't know how in depth, of how many grade levels, and that is something that we need to find out. And I believe that there are some steps that have been talked about anyway, of doing a survey to find out which schools are using them and which ones aren't. Because at this point, we don't know. And but it is true, they are not required, they are not mandatory, but they are highly encouraged to be used. And there's a great resource too with, they did the Wolakota project, which has a lot of interviews of the elders, and there is a lot of resources. And one of my hopes is that as we get the online resources, that website set up, that can be linked to all of the other resources, so that when someone can go to that site and say, oh, here's some things that I can use that would fit in with whatever that they might be teaching, and especially if they're working with South Dakota history, that it would fit in really nicely. I think this is a great opportunity to do that. Also, the professional development piece of it, I agree with Mr. Corey that there are some teachers that maybe feel like they are not informed enough, they don't have enough of the background. And so that brings us to teacher prep programs. Are they preparing the teachers as they're going out? And then what do we do with the teachers that are already in the field and working in the field of teaching? What kind of bridge do we have to help them feel confident in teaching that history if they have not been taught it as they were in their teacher prep programs? So we have work to do in South Dakota. Even that little piece, if we could improve that, we would be worlds and great strides ahead of where we're at right now.
Thank you for that honest answer. I appreciate that. I think we all do. Secretary Sanderson, I've gotten a question here from someone who asked about critical thinking skills. And I know from even teaching and coaching adult journalists that that is it seems to be a more of a rare commodity that is taught in schools, or if individuals find it on their own. But is there a way to incorporate real critical thinking and not have a one-way communication path from teacher to student, but make sure that there's student to student and student to teacher on these issues as important as government, civics, social studies, and history?
Yeah, absolutely. And rein me back if I get too in the weeds on education or instruction, because this is a really important topic that we need to wrestle with. I think that absolutely social studies education can help develop critical thinking skills. We are multidimensional people. We have a multidimensional past and story. And as we teach history, as we teach our own geography, our own government, we need to recognize in the classroom that there are multifaceted pieces of any topic that we discuss. And so students having an introduction to multiple sides of an event or an issue or even people's action within a certain time period, all of that is, our history is within a context. And so within the classroom, having an opportunity to learn and understand content, also having opportunities to reflect, to discuss in the classroom in a fairly moderated environment, that's great teaching. And a lot of our great teachers are making that happen for our students, especially at the middle school and high school level. But as we've discussed already, some of that's been taken out of the elementary level. And so that is, students are capable of discussion and critical thinking from very early on. And one of our opportunities is to nurture that at young grades and continue through the K-12 system.
Do you see an opportunity? I know we're a local control state, but do you see an opportunity for South Dakota to make it to incorporate or require that there be Native history included? And I'm not making an assumption that it's not being taught, but it seems that there could be improvement there. Do you have thoughts on how that could be improved in or outside the initiative?
Yeah, so within the initiative, we talked about the social studies standards revision process being the very first step. And so I think there are probably three big factors within the initiative where we need to have open conversations about Native American history and that part of our story in South Dakota to make sure that our students understand and appreciate the ins and outs. So within the standards revision process, I've tasked the team leading that work to ensure that we have an open conversation about what of our Native American history, how Native or tribal government works. We talked about sovereignty and citizenship and all of those kinds of things. We need to have a conversation about how that shows up in standards, specifically around the Native American context versus generally. And so I think about things like citizenship. There are a lot of angles to citizenship, including our Native American citizenship and state citizenship. So the standards revision process will touch on that. As we get into the South Dakota instructional materials development, and as Jackie was saying, the website that will house and curate great resources for the classroom. There are a tremendous amount of resources out there that need to be linked in, and this process is going to help us identify other resources that could potentially be in the hands of classroom teachers as we go forward. And then to Jace's thought about our teachers fully confident across the state in teaching things like the OSCUs, the Chetty Shakowin Essential Understandings. Teacher training is a part of this initiative, teacher professional development. And so there's an opportunity there to help build up confidence of folks who are in the classroom already. And as Jackie mentioned, with pre-service programs or educator prep programs at our universities.
Thank you. And I had a question here. Someone wants to know about the involvement of Native Americans on either in the initiative process and in the standards revision process. I know that Ms. DeCoria has told me that it's important not to just to have one or two, but to have a breadth of people from different tribes and different geographies across the state. I wanted to ask Ms. Sly, so separate from the initiative process, South Dakota is undergoing its regular every 7-year process of revising its social studies standards. Can you tell us just a brief synopsis of how that works? And if you think do these two go together, or are they completely separate? And what do you see any changes? I know it's early, but do you see any changes coming to the standards that are set for schools?
It's a long process, and I don't think that sometimes we realize all of the sweat equity that goes into a standards review. And it's people who are involved in education, and we want people from all different grade levels, all different perspectives, experiences. And I know when our last Indian Ed Advisory Council meeting, I really encouraged people on that council to come forward and volunteer, because we want those voices to be heard as we do the standards review. And that's has great value in not just social studies, but in all of them. And what happens is they'll start meeting, they've already have been put in their applications, and then there's that selection, because you need a balance of all the different subject areas and grade levels and parts of the state and all of that, size of schools, all of those things go into it. Then after they go through the standards, and if you're interested in finding out what the standards are, you can always go on, just do a search, South Dakota Social Studies Standards, and they come right up and you can find them and see what the standards are. They go through them, review them, and it's they meet, well, they used to meet in person a lot. I know the last standards review, a lot was done through Zoom. And then before they're ever approved by the board, there are 4 hearings that we have when people have the opportunity for input. They can be either, yes, we like this, or no, we don't like this. Could you consider changing it? Those committees come back together then and look at each one of those comments. You can submit comments online, and they are all considered each individually if those should be made into changes. So we have 4 hearings throughout South Dakota. One's in Aberdeen, Pierre, Rapid City, and Sioux Falls. So it takes us about 8 months just for the hearing part of it. And then eventually that we have that approval process that goes through it. So the work is really done by educators, South Dakota educators. And they are the ones that do the behind the scenes work, and eventually the board will approve them. So I do see the possibility of bringing in the discussion that we've been having of, say, the looking at more of the standards that we can focus on our Indigenous people, the history of that we've been talking about, and bringing that in. But we need the voices of the people that have the understanding and knowledge of that to come into that process, because if we don't have that, many of the educators, if we don't have the background in that, it's very hard to bring it into the standards that desire that there is.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask each panelist very briefly. A question has come up about a civics exam that's required of South Dakotans students before they graduate. Ms. Bryan, do you think a citizen exam is needed, a citizenship or civics exam is needed for students to graduate? Why or why not?
You know, as a classroom teacher, I don't know if I would support a civics exam. I'm not against it completely. I can see how it could encourage more civics education, but sometimes we like to have like these tests or whatever. And in my opinion, students seem to learn more in the classroom under good teaching with good instructional practices based in the standards. You know, if you think about some of the things that you really learned in school, it's possible that it really wasn't like something that was on an exam. It was probably when you had that aha moment and it connected with something in your life, or it made sense to you for the first time. So to me, I don't see a civics exam as something that really like increases our overall social studies education highly. I see it as you know, the teachers in the classroom, as they have maybe more resources or more focus on it, that they increase civics education through that form. I'm not saying I'm completely against it, but to me, sometimes a standardized test doesn't always have the outcome of learning that we want. They're needed, and we do have to have some testing, but I don't know if a civics exam would really have the outcome we're looking for, where I'm excited about, you know, if you have professional development, if you have more resources, those are all really great things for teachers to have that aha learning moment in the classroom, where those kids take those essential understandings and they apply them to their own citizenship not just a multiple choice question on a piece of paper before they, walk out that door for graduation. So.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. DeCory, do you think a citizenship or a civics exam should be required? I'm going to ask you to unmute one more time.
Yep, here I go again. Sorry. I'm not a real fan of any kind of exams. I tested my students a little bit different and I did a lot of exit interviews and one-on-one evaluation and when I got bigger classes, though, I did have to do some mass testing. But I like what Ms. Bryan had to say, that relevancy, I think, is really important. If you can show the things that are happening in real life, in their lives, and even some of those hard topics that might come up, some of those very scary kinds of things, like when you talk about white supremacy and some of the weird names that I'm hearing now, cancel culture and replacement theory and those kinds of things that are coming out in the media now. I think it's important that the students can get a feel and get an idea of what that means. How does that reflect in your life? So real life experience and relevancy, and so if they have opportunity to have materials and reading lists and resources that they can learn more about racism and misconceptions and stereotyping and things that have caused us to come to where we are in the United States, that it's a scary time for some of our people of color in particular. And so I think those hard issues, those hard topics have to be dealt with in some way. And if we can do that in a civics class, or in a way that we talk about equality and really mean it, and justice and really mean it, and discuss those issues that I think are make us what we are as Americans, and talk about commonalities, but also talk about differences. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have differing views and to talk about those things in a good way, not to put people down, but to hold people up. And so I was excited to hear about North Dakota. I know in Montana that for many years they've had American Indian history classes that students have to pass before they graduate from high school. Well, they're going to have it in North Dakota now. We recently passed last week that legislation. So I think that's wonderful that their students in high school will have to take an American Indian history class. I don't think it comes into play until next year or something, but it's certainly groundwork. I know that they did some hard work to get to that point, and there's no reason why South Dakota can't do that either. We can do that. We have a high population of American Indian students here that are in the system, and I guess I'm an optimist. I think that if folks can get together and talk about these things, only curriculum, content, historical accuracy, all the things we've been talking about this evening, I think that we can make some positive changes. And like I said, sometimes we fear that what we don't understand. So if we can better understand one another, and I think that the state will be of benefit to that, and also future generations will also benefit from that kind of forward thinking. Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you, Secretary Sanderson. 2 questions now. Civics exam required, Native American class required. Do you see that happening? Do you support that?
So I'll start with the civics test and definitely support a lot of what's been said already. Let's consider carefully, as we think about assessment, the best use of classroom time and the minutes that students have with teachers. And as we've looked at the citizenship test, there's about 100 questions on there. All of those questions are covered at least 3 different times in our current standards. So students are getting that content through their K-12 experience already. So the question is, does a test help to strengthen that education? If it's a multiple choice test, probably not, but does real classroom discussion or engaging with a county commissioner or a school board member or a state representative help them understand better how our government operates and their opportunity to engage in that? I'd go for the latter in terms of how we use our classroom time. So appreciate you bringing that question to us. And then in terms of Native American history, a course, I think that's part of what this group will need to wrestle with throughout the standards revision process. Does the group want to integrate Native American history and culture into classes that typically exist or standards that typically exist? Or is there an interest in having a full course? I think that's all open for discussion.
Thank you. Ms. Lai, what do you think? Civics exam required?
Civics exam required. That's been brought to the legislature while I was in there. And I guess I echo a lot of what has already been said. There are some logistic issues with it too. Okay, so if we're going to require a civics exam and you have a student that for whatever reason is not able to pass that exam, then do you keep them in school and prevent them from graduating from high school? Does that mean they're not going to be a good citizen because they can't pass the memory work? It's really memorized facts is what it is of the civics exam. Does that mean that they're not going to vote? Does that mean that they're not going to participate in being a coach of Little League? Does that mean that they're not going to respect the flag of our country? What does that mean when we pass a civics exam? It means that we know a lot of facts, but can we apply them to our daily life? And what I want for students is that they're good citizens and productive, part of their community, being able to be involved and be a part of the world around them. But I'm not convinced that by taking a civics test, and I'm not against, maybe taking it, seeing, for any one of us or all adults or all elected officials or whatever, if we're going to do that, how do we decide who made it and who didn't if someone doesn't happen to remember a fact of history or of the civics? And so I think we have to really think about the value of that, and then how would it be recorded? Who's going to keep track of it? Would it be a school district? Would it go to the state? Would that go on the student's transcript of they passed it? Oh, they didn't graduate from high school because they didn't, I don't know. There's a lot of logistics with it. So I would say, I think we need to really think it through before we just decide that's something really important for us to have.
Thank you. I want to come to closing remarks. We have about 2 minutes left. So 30 seconds. Staying with you, what do you hope comes out of this? Can you summarize what your hope is for this initiative, where we end up?
Well, I hope there's a couple of things. I hope that the public, because of this panel, has a better understanding of what the state is going to do. It's easy to get, if you don't know something, you can make a lot of assumptions and get upset about things if you don't really know what's going on. And I hope this has provided an opportunity for the public to get a better understanding. And then it's all about the students. And how do we get the students to be successful? Through the educators that are working with them. So it's really multi-purpose, and I think that we have certainly brought up some ideas and some things to consider as we move through this process.
Secretary Sanderson, briefly, what's your overall hope, your overriding hope here?
Yeah, I hope that through the many public processes that are in place here, standards of vision, South Dakota instructional materials, that people voice their opinions and become part of the process. I think it's a great example of us engaging as citizens to be part of this process. And I hope that on the back end, both our students are well educated and engaged in local communities in the state, and that we as a people feel really proud of where we are as South Dakotans and what we're offering in the classroom.
Terrific. Thank you. Ms. DeCory, 30 seconds. What's your brief hope that comes out of this process after you unmute?
Thanks for reminding me to unmute.
That's okay.
The brief process that I can say in 30 seconds isn't much, but what I would like to say is that I think the path to truth, the path to better understanding, building cultural bridges, many things have happened in the last couple of years. The change in mascot names, because people have a better understanding the history behind that. We are not mascots. And because of that, I think it's because Native people have finally gotten the word out and let people know, and we've let people know that we are here and we will be here for years to come. We have survived many generations, many kinds of things, catastrophes and things that have happened to us, boarding schools and all kinds of things, but we're still here. And our philosophy, our Native way of thinking, our Native way of viewing the world, our worldview is valuable and important for other folks to know, because we don't have all the answers, but we have a number of good answers that have helped us to survive throughout these years. And I hope that Native folks can share those kinds of things in this curriculum and in the standards that will help us to have a better understanding of one another as human beings and as unique human beings. And so thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I appreciate it. Mitako Yeyasi for all my relatives.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ms. Bryan, briefly, what's your hope when this initiative is set in motion? What do you hope comes out of it?
You know, I think from a teacher perspective, it's just my goal that we have good, authentic, whether it's resources, professional development. Sometimes when we start to create something in education, sometimes when it gets implemented, it doesn't have the impact that we want. And I want any type of focus on civics education to have a large impact. You know, I want our kids that are already learning a lot of good civics, a lot of good history. I want them to know more. And I hope that as we continue to teach, that our kids are even better at being a citizen than they are now. And I think the biggest thing for the teacher side is that whatever comes out of this initiative, I want it to be useful for me. I want to be able to take it, and I want to be able to put it into my classroom. And I'm the teacher, and I know I have to create those learning environments, but give me things that I can use. I don't want things that are just, you know, fluff, I guess you could say. I don't know any other way to say that, but I want something that I can use and I can take to my students and it's easy to use and more understanding for me. That's what I really hope comes out of this initiative. Anytime that I can improve as an educator, I'm excited about that, but I just want it to be relevant to what I teach and what I do every day.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you all to all the panelists. Thanks to all of our viewers. And if you want to learn more about this topic and other important issues, please visit our website, sdnewswatch.org, and you'll find a lot of coverage of some of the most important topics facing South Dakota today. Thanks again for everyone, and everyone have a terrific and safe evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.